My name is Samuel Freeman, and I belong to the most dangerous family ever sold in the South. In 1854, at the Savannah slave auction, Master William Thornfield thought he had struck a bargain. For the price of one prime field hand, he bought my whole bloodline. Mama Zara, Big Moses, Aunt Ruth, little David, and me. He loaded us onto his wagon, smiling, proud of his clever purchase. He had no idea he was hauling his own death sentence home. Before I tell you how it all ended, subscribe now and comment your state below. I want to know where you're watching from. And if your hometown keeps secrets, the history books won't print. We were called docile, loyal, grateful. That was the mask we wore. What Thornfield never knew was that we had already turned 3 plantations into ashes, buried masters under their own cotton, and disappeared like smoke before word could spread. We were not slaves. We were infiltrators. Every smile we gave, every yes, master, was a thread in the noose tightening around his neck. And so the question remains, when a man buys a family at auction, does he really own us? Or has he just purchased the fire that will burn his world to the ground? The air in Savannah that morning was thick with heat and voices. The slave market stood like a stage built for human misery. Wooden platforms, iron chains, and a crowd of white men with silver in their pockets and greed in their eyes. I was lot 47. My family stood beside me, each of us numbered, each of us measured like cattle. I remember the smell most of all. Sweat, tobacco, and fear. Not my fear. Theirs. The masters pretended confidence, but they all knew a bargain could turn into a curse if they bought the wrong flesh. That is why the seller spoke sweetly of us, calling us docile, grateful, obedient. He was too eager to let us go, too desperate to wash his hands clean of the fire that followed us from state to state. Mama Zara stood tall, her face calm, her eyes lowered just enough to look harmless. Anyone who looked too long might think she was nothing more than a weary woman nearing middle age. But I knew better. She was our strategist, the mind that turned slavery itself into a weapon. Beside her was Big Moses, taller than any man in the market, broad as a soldier, with scars across his arms from battles most of these masters had never fought. They saw muscle. I saw a general waiting for his next campaign. Aunt Ruth kept her hands folded neatly, quiet and plain. Yet I had seen those hands crush leaves, boil roots, and turn the gifts of the earth into poisons that could end a man's life as softly as a whisper. And then there was little David, only 7 years old. He clutched my hand as the auctioneer shouted numbers, his small eyes scanning the crowd. The master saw innocence. What they didn't see was a scout learning how to move like smoke. How to notice every key, every door, every careless word. When the bidding began, Thornfield raised his hand with the arrogance of a man who believed money bought safety. He bid low. No one challenged him. The seller, sweating with relief, let us go for almost nothing. A bargain, the crowd muttered. A whole family for the price of one. But Thornfield had not bought workers. He had bought fire. He had bought silence that knew how to plan, hands that knew how to kill, and a child who could see without being seen. As the chains clinked and the papers changed hands, I whispered to myself, another plantation, another grave waiting to be dug. 34 Savannah. One auction, one family. The trail of fire begins. Tell me, if freedom cost blood, would you have paid the price? The road from Savannah to central Georgia was long, dust rising behind Thornfield's wagon like a funeral shroud. I sat with chains biting my wrists, staring at the wheels turning, each creak and groan reminding me of other wheels I had turned, other plantations already reduced to smoke. When we finally arrived, the Thornfield estate rose before us, 300 acres of cotton stretching white as bone under the sun. The big house stood proud on a hill, painted in smug layers of wealth, columns thick as trees, windows like watchful eyes. To the outside world, it was a kingdom. To us, it was another battlefield. Thornfield strutted as he showed us off to his overseers. He spoke of profit, of cotton yields, of debts soon to be repaid. He thought we were his solution. In truth, we were his ending. Our assignments came quickly. Mama Zara was sent into the big house as a housemaid, where her careful obedience and quick wit would soon place her closer to Mistress Catherine than any white servant. Ruth was put among the livestock, tending to stables, feed, and sick animals, the perfect cover for her poisons and her experiments. Moses and I were driven to the cotton fields, sweating under the whip, working harder than any man to hide our purpose. But while our bodies bent to the crop, our minds mapped weaknesses, overseer routines, guard posts where the pistols hung and where the shadows fell. And little David, sweet, harmless David, was given charge of the master's prized horses. They cooed over him, called him precious, treated him like a pet. He smiled shyly and nodded, but behind those boyish eyes he memorized every path, every doorway, every place where fire would spread fastest. At night, we gathered in silence, speaking without words, a nod, a glance, a touch, each of us already working, already setting roots into the heart of Thornfield's pride. He had welcomed us into his home, confident in his power. He did not know he had just invited the match that would one day strike against all he owned. 54, Georgia. One plantation, one mistake. A death sentence begins to breathe. And would you have seen danger in our silence or trusted the smiles we wore? In the South, survival wore a mask, and no one wore it better than us. Within weeks, Mama Zara became the beating heart of the big house. Mistress Catherine adored her, called her a gift from heaven. She trusted Zara with keys, secrets, even her worries. Every ledger she opened, every whisper she shared, was another weapon slipped into our hands. Mama smiled sweetly, bowed her head, and kept count of every door, every drawer, every hidden fear. Ruth played her role to perfection among the livestock. She healed a sick horse that she herself had poisoned the night before. Just enough to make it stumble, not enough to kill. The whites praised her as a miracle worker, blind to the truth that she could take life as easily as she gave it back. Soon she had free run of the stables, feed rooms, and barns. The perfect cover for when her work would matter most. Big Moses and I bent under the sun in the fields, hands raw from cotton, overseer's shadow heavy across our backs. We worked harder than any, faster than any, until even the overseer muttered that we might earn privileges. He never knew that Moses was studying his stride, his habits, his lazy rests by the creek. He never saw how my eyes traced the sheds, the fences, the stores of tools that could be sharpened into blades. And little David, harmless, sweet David, skipped across the grounds like a shadow no one noticed. The master's children played with him. The mistress stroked his hair. He smiled at their kindness while quietly tracing the locks on the doors, the hiding place of the pistols, the cracks in the stable where a boy could slip unseen. Day by day, the mask of loyalty hardened around us. To them we were faithful, tireless, indispensable. To us we were infiltrators laying stones for the grave they did not yet know was waiting. Georgia. A family trusted too much. A mask hiding fire. Tell me, would you have believed loyalty or looked deeper into the eyes behind it? Night was when the real work began. When the overseers slept heavy with whiskey. When the white children dreamed in feather beds. When the fields lay silent under moonlight. That was when we whispered. Big Moses would sit among the other slaves at the fire, his voice low and steady, spinning stories as if they were nothing more than gossip. You ever hear about Blackwood Plantation in Alabama? He'd say, tossing a twig into the flames. Whole place gone in one night. House, fields, master all turned to ash. Slaves vanished like smoke. The others would lean closer, eyes wide. Some laughed nervously, others crossed themselves. But in their faces I saw it, the spark of possibility. They had lived their whole lives believing masters were untouchable. Now for the first time they imagined otherwise. Ruth added her own tales during the long days with the animals. Strangest thing, she'd murmur while mixing feed. Heard of a place in Mississippi where every horse, every cow, every hog just died in a single night. Next morning the master's family was dead too. Folks said it was sickness. She'd shrug like it was nothing. But the message sank deep. The powerful could be broken quick as breath, and Mama Zara, her whispers carried weight of a different kind. From inside the big house, she brought us news that mattered most. One evening, in the shadows of the tobacco barn, she told us, Thornfield is drowning in debt. He's writing letters to Savannah traders. Plans to sell field hands come spring. The words were heavy. Slaves who feared sale feared nothing more. Families torn apart. Children ripped from mothers. It was the cruelest knife the South used against us. And now, It was the blade we could turn into a weapon. That night, in the quiet hum of the quarters, I saw men and women look at each other with new fire in their eyes. Fear turned to anger. Anger turned to readiness. Folk Georgia. Whispers spread. Chains rattled with secret meaning. Dude, if you heard the promise of rebellion in the dark, would you whisper it forward? Or stay silent? Rebellion doesn't grow in a day. It grows in silence, in shadows, in places no master thinks to look. Ruth found her place in the far corner of the plantation, where a patch of wild soil lay forgotten. There, beneath the cover of weeds, she built her secret garden. Not of flowers, but of weapons. Pokeweed, castor beans, nightshade. Leaves that could cure or kill. Roots that could heal or rot a man's insides. By day, she gathered medicine for the animals. By night, she mixed small powders and liquids, testing their strength on rats, chickens, even the master's dogs. The whites praised her as a healer. They never knew she was perfecting the art of poison. My own work was dirtier. In the smokehouse, I scraped saltpeter from the walls. In the stables, I stole sulfur from the veterinary jars. Charcoal from the forge I ground to dust. 3 simple things, when bound together, became fire that could eat wood, shatter stone, and light the sky. I buried jars beneath hay, tucked fuses into tool bins, scattered powder where no one would think to look. Big Moses trained the strongest of our kin. He turned hoes into spears, scythes into blades, and drilled them in the quiet hours. Every strike of his hand, every whispered order, was a lesson in war disguised as work. And Mama Zara, she played the longest game of all. By the mistress's side, she traced every hallway, counted every lock, copied letters when no one watched. She smiled as she poured tea and memorized the family's secrets while their guard was down. Each of us worked apart, but together we wove a single net, unseen, patient, tightening around Thornfield's throat. Of Georgia. Beneath the soil, poisons grew. In the barns, fire waited. And if survival meant turning silence into a weapon, would you have planted the same seeds? The autumn of 1855 came cold, the fields brittle with dry stalks, the air sharp with the scent of smoke from distant farms. It was the season when fire moved fastest, when one spark could eat a whole field before dawn. We had been waiting more than a year, and the night we chose carried its own mask. October 31st. Halloween. To the whites, it was nothing but another evening for feasts and games. To us, it was the perfect cloak. Music and laughter in the quarters would hide our movements. Shadows would be thick, and no neighbor would question a scream on a night when folks spoke of spirits. That afternoon, Mama Zara worked in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared the family's feast. To the other servants, she looked devoted, almost motherly in her care. But every spice she measured, every dish she touched was part of Ruth's plan. The wine would carry the poison. The meat would carry paralysis like a whisper crawling through their veins. Moses moved quietly among our chosen brothers and sisters in the fields. He placed a hand on a shoulder here, a nod there, silent signals that the hour was near. In the stables, David stroked the master's prized horses, whispering to them like friends. He would release them when the time came, scattering any chance of escape. As for me, I checked my caches one last time. The barn was rigged. The cotton house was primed. Fuses coiled like snakes waiting for a spark. That night, under a crescent moon, our family gathered in the old tobacco barn. We knelt in the dirt, heads bowed, not in prayer, but in pact. No turning back. No survivors. Freedom carved through fire and blood. Mama Zara spoke only once. Tomorrow the Thornfields dine with death. 55 Georgia. One night left, a mask of celebration, a shadow of fire. If you knew tomorrow was your master's last sunrise, would you sleep? Or sharpen your blade? The Thornfield dining room glittered that night, as if wealth itself could ward off doom. A long oak table, candles burning high, silver polished to a mirror's edge. Mistress Catherine wore midnight silk. Master Thornfield, proud and fat with arrogance, raised his glass and boasted of debts soon to be repaid. Their children laughed unknowing, and we, Mama Zara, Ruth, myself, moved like shadows behind them. Silent hands serving food, pouring wine, bowing our heads in false devotion. Every gesture rehearsed, every smile sharpened like a blade. Ruth's poison had no color, no taste. It slid into the wine like a ghost, invisible, unstoppable. When Thornfield lifted his glass and toasted to family, to fortune, to God's blessing, he drank his own undoing. Mistress Catherine sipped with a smile. The children followed. Each swallow was another chain snapping free. Minutes passed. Their laughter thinned. Master Thornfield's hand began to tremble. His glass slipped, shattered against the floor. "Something's wrong," he rasped, clutching his throat. Catherine's fork clattered from her fingers, her voice strangled by a paralysis she could not name. The children gasped, eyes wide with terror as their limbs turned heavy as stone. That was when Mama Zara stepped forward. No longer a servant, no longer a shadow. Her voice was calm, sharp as steel. "Good evening, Master Thornfield. Do you enjoy your meal? We prepared it especially for you." His eyes, wide, bloodshot, desperate, found mine. You did this." I leaned close, my voice low enough only for him to hear. "No, Master. You did this. When you bought us, they were alive, conscious, but trapped in bodies that no longer obeyed them, forced to watch as their kingdom of cotton began to crack. And that was only the beginning. 1855, Georgia. Wine turned to venom. Masters paralyzed. A mask finally dropped. If justice came in a poisoned cup, would you drink it or pass it on? The first blast shook the ground like judgment. A roar split the night, and the Thornfield barn erupted into fire. Flames climbed fast, licking the black sky, sparks scattering like angry stars. The sound reached every corner of the plantation, and in that moment the silence of years shattered. I had lit the fuse myself, powder stitched together from saltpeter, sulfur and charcoal scraped in secret. Now it was alive, devouring timber, consuming hay, driving horses into a frenzy. The overseers staggered out of their quarters, half-drunk, confused, grabbing rifles they would never have the chance to fire. Big Moses was waiting. He came like a storm, axe in hand, with 37 men and women at his back. They did not come as slaves. They came as soldiers. Shouts split the air, not of obedience, but of fury long buried. The overseers' whips cracked once, twice, then were silenced by steel and fire. The cotton house was next. My fuses ran hot through the dry bales, and in a breath, the wealth of Thornfield turned into a blazing field of ash. Smoke rolled across the land, thick and choking. Neighbors miles away would see the sky glowing red, and wonder if hell itself had risen. In the stables, little David loosed the horses, slapping their flanks until they thundered into the night, wild and riderless. Carriages lay broken, wheels smashed, escape cut off. No messenger would ride to summon help. The Thornfield estate was a fortress of fire, and no one inside would outlive it. And through the smoke, I saw the truth written in the overseers' dying eyes. For the first time, they realized their power was nothing but fear. And fear burns. 855 Georgia. Barns in flames. Overseers cut down. The night turned red. Would you have run into the fire for freedom? Or stayed in chains? While the fields roared with fire, the big house became a tomb. The Thornfields lay slumped in their chairs, bodies stiff, eyes wide with terror. The poison did its work, paralyzed but alive enough to witness every moment of their ruin. The candles flickered, painting shadows across their silk and lace. Wealth had never looked so fragile. The house servants, long bent under years of insult, began their own harvest. The cook, who had endured 20 years of slaps and curses, raised her carving knife against the butler who once spat in her face. A parlor maid whose daughter had been sold away wrapped her hands around the governess's throat and squeezed until silence came. They were not slaves in that moment. They were executioners, reclaiming breath that had been stolen. I remember Master Thornfield's eyes following me as I walked the length of his table. His lips trembled, trying to form words. "Why?" he managed, breath shallow, voice broken. Mama Zara answered for us all. She leaned close, her voice calm, almost tender. "Because you trusted us. And trust, Master, is a weapon sharper than any blade." The children whimpered, unable to move, forced to watch the only world they had known collapse around them. The screams from outside mixed with the crackle of fire. And still the family sat, locked inside their failing bodies, drowning in terror they could not escape. By midnight, the big house was no longer a place of pride. It was a stage of reckoning, lit by flame, echoing with the sound of chains breaking in ways no master could control. Georgia. In the big house, blood answered blood. And if vengeance sat at your master's table, would you lift the cup or look away? By dawn, the Thornfield estate was nothing but ruin. The barns collapsed into glowing embers. The cotton fields lay blackened, their fortune turned to dust. The overseers were scattered in pieces, their whips rotting in the fire. And in the big house, silence pressed heavy against walls that once rang with orders and cruelty. But before we left, there was one task that mattered most. A mark, a warning, a memory carved so deep no one in Georgia would ever forget it. Ruth dipped her fingers into the blood that pooled across the dining room floor. With a steady hand, she scrawled across the plastered wall. The Freeman incendiaries were here. Free your slaves or burn like Thornfield. The letters dripped, shining crimson in the candlelight. It was not just a signature. It was a curse, carried by rumor and fear into every plantation for miles. Mama Zara gathered the papers she had stolen, ledgers, letters, accounts that told of Thornfield's debts and dealings. Gold and silver filled a satchel. Tools, weapons, seeds for the journey to come. Big Moses led the freed men and women from the quarters. 37 fighters and 50 more who had chosen escape over silence. Children clung to mothers. Elders leaned on shoulders, but all walked with eyes brightened by fire. And little David, the boy they once called harmless, carried the mistress's keys jangling in his pocket. He jingled them softly, smiling like he knew the sound would haunt every master's dream. When we stepped into the dawn, the Thornfield plantation was finished. What once stood as a kingdom now smoldered as ash, and behind us our message burned brighter than the flames. A death sentence written for every master who still believed slaves could not rise. Georgia. A name written in blood. A message carried by fire. If rebellion left its mark on your walls, would you see it as warning or prophecy? 3 days after we vanished into the woods, riders came. Neighbors, merchants, planters with rifles across their saddles. They expected to find Thornfield barking orders, cotton stacked for market. Instead, they found silence. The big house stood black and broken. Windows melted into hollow eyes. The barns were piles of ash. The fields, once white with cotton, lay scarred and smoking. And in the dining room, under the faint stench of blood, they found the words. Scrawled in red across the plaster, the Freeman incendiaries were here. Free your slaves or burn like Thornfield. Men who had cracked whips without a thought now crossed themselves like frightened children. Some muttered about abolitionists from the north. Outsiders come to stir trouble. Others whispered of devils, of curses, of Haiti reborn on Georgia soil. But deep down they knew the truth. This was no outside force. This was the work of their own slaves. Fear spread faster than fire. Masters looked at their house servants and wondered if loyalty was only a mask. Overseers eyed the fields and saw not workers but soldiers waiting for nightfall. Every smile became suspicious. Every whisper carried dread. Some doubled their guards. Some tightened chains. A few, trembling with terror, sold off their plantations and fled to the cities. But none of them could erase what Thornfield's ashes proved. Trust could be poisoned. Obedience could be an act. And even the most loyal slave could be carrying a torch behind his back. And across the South, fires began to flicker in the imagination of every enslaved man and woman who heard the story. If Thornfield could fall, so could any master. B5, Georgia. One plantation reduced to ash. Fear spread like smoke across the South. Do you think history remembers the truth of these ruins? Or only the lies the masters told? We walked away from Thornfield like ghosts. 87 souls slipping into the backwoods before dawn. Behind us, smoke coiled into the sky. A funeral pyre for a world that believed it could own us. Ahead of us lay uncertainty, swamps, rivers, bounty hunters, hunger. But for the first time, the chains were broken. Word of Thornfield's fall spread on the wind. In taverns, they called it a mystery. In newspapers, they blamed outsiders. But in the slave quarters, in whispers passed from one set of trembling lips to another, the truth grew. Family called Freeman had turned plantations into graves. A mask of loyalty had become a blade. Fire had become freedom. Plantation owners grew paranoid, clutching pistols in their beds, staring too long at their house servants, wondering which smile hid their ruin. Some doubled their chains. Others abandoned their land. But none of them could sleep without seeing flames in the corners of their eyes. As for us, we did not seek glory. We sought only to make the South taste its own medicine, to remind them that those they called property carried memory, carried rage, carried the will to turn cotton into cinders. Each place we struck was not just destruction but warning. Slavery itself was the fuse, and it was burning fast. I am Samuel Freeman, and history may forget our names, may bury our deeds under lies of accident and tragedy. But every master who saw Thornfield's ashes remembered one truth. When you buy a family in chains, you may also be buying the fire that will end you. Fenby 5, Georgia. A family sold, a plantation burned, a legend born. Would you have joined us in the fire? Or prayed the chains would hold? If you've stayed with this story until the end, you care about the truths history tried to bury. Subscribe now, share your thoughts below, and join us for the next Untold tale.